Did you know that a study was done that found that only around 26% of people have what's described as an inner monologue? This is a story that's been making the rounds quite a bit, and I'd like to weigh in on this because I find it very fascinating. Bustle, as well as many other outlets, have written stories about what it's like to not have an internal monologue. Let me start from the beginning. A lot of people are going around saying NPCs are real. If you're not familiar with the concept of an NPC, I will tell you it's a non-player character. When you play a video game, let's say Mario Brothers, the original Mario, because most people can understand what Mario is. You've seen it. You're a little Italian plumber, and you control him. You can make him jump, and you can make him punch bricks. I always thought that was really funny that Mario punches bricks, but he does. When he jumps, his fist is above his head, and he bashes the bricks, and, mushrooms come out. What an odd game. The story is actually pretty crazy. Apparently, the bricks are they were people that were turned into bricks. I'm not kidding. He's bashing them open to collect items that could help him on his journey. Anyway, when you're playing Mario, you know that Mario, he's a player character. You are the force behind Mario. You press right, he goes right. You press left, he goes left. You press A, he jumps. You hold B, he runs. But you know that the turtle guys, the Koopas, there's no one playing them. But they move left and right too. Some of them even jump. Those are non-player characters. They are characters in the game you can interact with, but they're not players, and there's nothing behind them but program. That's what many people say about those with no internal monologue. And now the argument is, let me pull up the tweet from Raw Egg Nationalist. He tweeted, if you ever struggle to understand why things are the way they are and why life is so terribly frustrating, remember that 50% of the population don't even have an inner monologue, and they get to vote too. Well, I showed a study that I have the story from IFL Science. People with no internal monologue explain what it's like in their head. And in this excerpt, it says subjects experience themselves as inwardly talking to themselves in 26% of all samples. But there were large individual differences. Some subjects never experienced inner speech. In as many as 75% of samples, the median percentage across subjects was 20%. Now, the numbers varied. Some say 30, some say 20, some say 50. But the point is this. You'll notice in many of these stories about internal monologue, they are all framed as though it is shocking to not have one. What does that mean? If the reality is half of all people do not think inwardly in words to themselves, and even as high as 74% do not, why would the media frame things as though it is shocking to discover? Certainly half to the majority of people, they would be writing stories titled, "Here's what it's like to think in words in your mind." Because if you were in the minority position, you'd imagine that the news outlets would be shocked to find that there are a certain subset of people that actually think in language and words in their own mind. But this presents an interesting circumstance, an interesting reality. The people who are writing articles, who are in control of media, tend to have an inner monologue. I don't know what that means, but it means that the bias is in favor of the minority. Now, if it's 50-50, then it's not so much, but the bias is still in favor of those with an inner monologue are likely to be in positions of narrative, be it Timcast or be it Bustle or any other news outlet. Because the narrative is always framed as though it's shocking that some people don't have an internal monologue. You understand what I'm saying? What this says to me is people with an internal monologue are more likely to wield influence. And that's a fact based on these stories. It also says to me that maybe the NPC thing is real. But I do have a simpler explanation for it that I think is less biased. You see, the people who think to themselves with their inner monologue, which is probably many of you, including myself, tend to view themselves as superior. Why, anyone who does not is an NPC. Yeah, I don't buy that. I think it's actually a bit more simple than that. There are varying degrees of cognitive function, and some people think in images. Some people think in amorphous, abstract ways that don't require words. And one could actually argue that if you do not have an inner monologue, you can react more quickly. While others actually have written stories saying they react much more slowly as their brain struggles to process information. They don't communicate to themselves. I want to read this a little bit for you to give you a general idea of what is being explained. But I do believe this is fascinating. And I'll give you my breakdown, but let me give you some context. Bustle writes, take a second to sit in silence. Is there chatter inside your head, or is it relatively quiet in there? There's a conversation making its way around TikTok about this inner voice, or lack thereof. Some people have a chatty internal monologue that narrates their life, while others have a quiet, serene inner landscape. The folks with the internal monologue simply cannot imagine not having one, and vice versa. I will tell you this. There is not a waking moment of my life. There is not high intensity language blasting through my brain. And if you're wondering why it is that I talk so fast, it's because the narration in my mind is probably at 5 to 10 times verbal communication speed. So I can simplify this very simply. If you've ever heard me do that rapid fire pitch at the end of Timcast IRL, where I talk as quickly as possible, and I say, become a member at timcast.com, sign up, join our, blah, 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 blah. You get the point. That is slower than I think things. The inner monologue that I have is speaking faster than my mouth can actually iterate. This is easily proven by the fact that I can talk as fast as I can. Or at the very least, I can say this. You know that my brain processes words at least as quickly as I am speaking them. And there are many people who are faster than I am, who talk really, really fast. And it's because language processing is really, really quick. I'm not saying this to say that I'm better or worse than anyone else. It just means that language processes very quickly. I'll get into all this, but let's read some more. They say, as someone with an inner monologue, I fall into the first group. My inner voice mulls over problems, narrates my day, assesses situations as they're happening, pulls up funny memories, and it's been that way forever. That's me, the person who talks out loud. And then there's the other me, that little voice that exists behind my eyeballs. My inner monologue is where I work, walk, go about daily life, and I'm pretty okay with that. It's what I'm used to. In fact, I don't know what else I'd do without her. I think it's weird to refer to yourself in a separate in the third person, but I will also add, I think, therefore I am. This is what's fascinating to me. I think, therefore I am. If someone, I gotta play this clip for you guys. Let me play this clip for you guys. Nope, this is the wrong one. Where we go? Here we go. Here's the clip. Let's play this clip. Okay. I know. Let's roll.
People literally have a voice inside of their head. I don't have an inner monologue, and I literally cannot see anything in my mind's eye. If you told me to think of an apple right now and I closed my eyes, I literally would quite literally see blackness. When I read a book, the words just somehow, I just comprehend them, but there's no voice. When I'm thinking of a memory, I literally can't see it, I don't know how, I just remember it. And I honestly didn't know that anyone could think in a different way until a year ago. I literally thought the voice in your head thing was just on TV. And I don't think I've ever met anyone that is in the same boat as me. So if you can relate, please comment below so I don't feel like a freak.
I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum. In fact, my friends, as I was watching that video, I was thinking in a multi-track way. This is fascinating to me. If you don't think, if you don't see, if you don't hear, if you don't visualize, if you don't audialize, what's the word for that? We know what visualize means, and it's there's a word for it. Visualize. It means think of it in your mind. You can see it in your brain. Some people can't visualize, but visualize is a common existing word, meaning many people can do it. Audialize, is that the word? Hear it in your head. I can hear songs in my head. Everybody gets a song stuck in their head. Here's the fascinating thing to me. I have to just say this with all due respect to that woman. She is an NPC. I think, therefore I am. The justification and the proof for yourself that you exist is that you think to yourself. And if you do, that means you're there. But if you are just incapable of anything going on in there, then that's an NPC. And it's fascinating to me because that literally is the case. Now, non-player character is probably not the right way to phrase it, but this is a non-sentient being. I mean, let me do this. Let me pull up the definition of sentient for you so that we can break this down. Sentient means capable of sensing or feeling, conscious of or responsive to the sensations of seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling. Sentient beings. Sentient being is able to feel things or sense them. Sentient usually occurs in phrases like sentient beings or sentient creatures, making it clear that things don't have life or feelings. So, okay, perhaps I'm being a little bit too harsh. We certainly could argue that they are sentient beings, but they are not conscious entities. And that's the weird thing about all of it. They're not sentient. If you can't think to yourself, either in pictures, words, or sounds, if you are not thinking, this woman says, I literally see blackness. I can't picture an apple. I see nothing in my mind's eye. There are no words. Then that's quite literally someone who is not a conscious being. Conscious meaning in your mind, you are conscious of what is happening. It's strange. I don't know how to, I have no other understanding of it's unfathomable to me. But what ends up happening then is you get people who say, see, these people vote, and they do. So make no mistake, when you see someone who can't think to themselves, they're not going to be able to process complex questions and logic because they can't think to themselves. Certainly, what I said earlier is, people think that if there's no inner monologue, you're not thinking at all. That's not the case. Some people can think in abstract. Some people can think in images or sounds, but not words. And some can do all of it. So there are ways of thinking that are not just, I'm talking to myself in my head. Certainly, you can sense and feel and experience these things. So that is not a guarantee that just because someone doesn't have an inner monologue, meaning they're not capable of processing thought. But it does certainly mean that people like that woman is incapable of processing complex problems and solving them. That is to say, if you can't think, see, visualize, or talk to yourself, and someone asks you, you have 2 apples, you add 2 more, how many apples do you have? Certainly a person may process the information in some capacity where they know the answer is just 4. For me, I actually can see the apples in my mind. I can stack them. I can rotate them. I can spin them. This is a wild thing. I remember when I was younger and we had these IQ tests and I've taken them formally or whatever. And they ask you, they'll give you a picture of an object and ask you to rotate it in your mind or to take a cube and unfold the cube and all of its sides and then place them on it. And this is testing your spatial awareness and your ability to visualize. If you can see, what they'll do is it'll look like a cross, and they'll say, fold these panels together to make a cube, and then they'll show the cube and say which pattern. Each tile will have a different symbol, and it'll say which symbol would appear on this tile, and then you have to answer it. And the goal here is, can you understand? Can you visualize in your mind? There are many people who can't do that, and thus brings us to an interesting conundrum. There are people who are capable of solving complex problems because they can see tremendously in their mind in many different ways. And there are people who can't do that. But the people who can't do that negate the votes of the people who can, and the people who can seem to be fewer and far between. Thus, we live in a world where you will end up with many politicians who believe, and probably many Democrats, that it is their imperative to seize control by force and deception because the people who can't process information outnumber those who can. And those who can't process information will likely just spiral out and die over a long period of time. Thus, you understand why there are people like Adam Schiff. Not that I think the guy's smart. Not that I think he's capable or thinking. I think he's evil. But there are many people like him who think to themselves, because I can process information and these people can't, I will just manipulate and seize power. It's a weird world to live in. I got to be honest. Now, what I will add, going back to the argument, well, I don't think it's fair to say that all people with no inner monologue are NPCs. I'll put it this way. As I mentioned earlier, some people can visualize information. Some people may not think the words, but they can certainly in their mind see block plus block equals block, right? Like you can visualize images. You can think in words. You can hear sounds. What I think this is may have a lot to do with brain development as a child. Were you exposed to things that built the neural pathways? And there are degrees of consciousness. I was reading the scientific study that said it is not that animals are simply not conscious. It's that there are varying degrees of consciousness, and it makes me fascinated by what would be beyond human. We view ourselves as the epitome, the apex of conscious thought. We are reasoning beings. We can build and control and manipulate our environments and do wonders, even go to outer space. What's next? We certainly are not the end-all be-all of consciousness. That would be absurd. There is certainly something greater and beyond us, which is a contributing factor to my belief in God. But, we're limited by what we think what we know and what we can perceive. What I think is that, as I stated, there are varying degrees of capability of processing thought. This woman I showed you in this video, 0. She is incapable of processing thought. That's a scary reality, that these people vote and have positions of power because they can't process thought. But you see these people on the streets when someone does a man on the street interview and they're like, they can't recall things. They can't process the information. They cannot solve complex problems. For me, it's always weird to see these stories. And I remember the first time I heard about the internal monologue thing, I think it was a long time ago, 10 years ago or something. No, it was longer than 10 years, like 15 years ago, maybe 16 years ago. For me, it was weird. When I first heard this concept, let me ask you this. When you think to yourself, we're going to take this to its next logical step. There are many people who are like, wait, you don't think words to yourself throughout the day? Yeah, for me, there is no moment, as I mentioned earlier. When I'm getting on my bike, it is just information flow to the millionth degree. The words that I hear in my mind are communicated faster than my mouth can speak them, which is why I'm able to talk as fast as I can. And why I have, like, as a kid, I'm thinking all these things. I can't get the words out fast enough, so I eventually end up talking really fast. So it goes one step beyond this. What if I were to ask you, when you're thinking words, how many sentences are you thinking? How many tracks do you have? It was surprising for me to learn that some people can only think one thing at a time. That was surprising for me when I first started learning of people thinking differently. This is a huge influence in my understanding of reality, in that as I was younger, and most people I think who are younger, this is a lack of wisdom. They believe that everyone experienced the same thing. They think everyone thinks the same thing they do. They think everyone perceives the same thing they do and everyone experiences the world in the same way. There are many people who are adults who still feel this way, and it's why they think that if you're voting for Trump, you're a liar. There's literally nothing Trump could have ever done because I know everything and you know what I know. Therefore, you're lying because if I thought what you thought, I'd be lying too. They project. At a certain point, I realized different experiences means different mental development and different capabilities. And then when I learned reading these books about inner monologue and the lack thereof, I went, whoa. And then through conversation, I realized it actually goes well beyond inner monologue. So here's what I'll try to explain in my brain. In my brain, while I'm talking, I actually have a visual track, an audio track, a linguistic track, and they're all going off at the same time. Multiple tracks at the same time. It's the weirdest thing ever. While I'm talking right now, I was just visioning people playing a game of soccer for some reason. I don't know why. That's what it was. While I'm on Timcast style reading a news story, I can go into autopilot and read things while I'm thinking about doing my laundry and planning the rest of my day. It's probably why I'm so good at pressing record and just talking for a long period of time. I've gotten asked before, like, so you do all the production for your morning show? I'm like, yeah, I do it. I'm like, so how long does it take? And I was like, I work from this time to this time. And they're like, oh, okay. So like, what do you use to write your scripts? And I was like, I don't write any scripts. They're like, what? How do you just talk? And I'm like, I don't know. I just do. Stream of consciousness, I suppose what people call it. But here's the other thing. While I am talking, I could be reading these paragraphs. In fact, I'll tell you this. Every single time I have read a paragraph, this is how this show works. When I see this story and it says, let's jump down so I can actually read something. And it says, according to research, only 30 to 50% of people have inner monologues, which means up to 70% of people don't have a talkative brain. The thing to keep in mind, no pun intended, is that it can vary from person to person, says Ogle. And an inner voice could become more or less intense throughout your life, depending on your mental state. If you're super stressed, for instance, it'll ramp up. While I was reading that, I am planning already what I'm going to be saying next. Reading this is autopilot. I can read it while thinking of what I'm going to say next once the paragraph stops. And I'm thinking about plans for later in the day. It's wild. It's not really wild to me until I realize that many people can't do that. So here, I'll tell you what's going on in my brain as I'm reading this. I'm planning what I'm going to say next, why I'm saying it, and what I'm going to say. As I'm reading this, it's quite literally the easiest thing for me to do. I am reading words and I can say them quickly. I'm also preparing what's going to be said after the paragraph is done being read. So while I'm reading, I am actually writing the script essentially for what is to be said next. That's what I'm doing. And at the same time, I am planning, we are going to be skating later today. Someone's coming to the skate park. And so I'm envisioning in my mind, what do I see? I see me skateboarding on the mini ramp in the basement, and I'm thinking of various tricks I can do and how to do them. When I want to do a trick on a skateboard, I visualize doing it. In my mind, I see myself in slow motion doing all of the moves and motions required. That's happening in my brain. I can see it as I'm reading the paragraph and as I am hearing what I will be saying next. So I don't know how many tracks there are, 4 maybe. How I write music, for instance, is I play a movie in my mind. So if you think about the song we released, Eyes of Advice, and the demon comes out and Ian's grasping towards the demon and all that stuff, that's how I wrote the song. Will of the People, same thing. In my mind, I imagine a story and a scenario, and I see it happen and play out. While it's happening, I think about how to describe it. Then I think of a melody. In my mind, I see a music video. And that is how I end up writing music. This is the crazy thing. When I first learned this, to me, it was normal. There are people who say, you mean you don't think in words to yourself? And I thought, there are people who only think in words to themselves? I have nothing to say whether it's good, bad, or otherwise. I think some people are really good at lifting. Some people are really good at jumping. Some people are really good at thinking. And if you're really good at thinking, it's going to give you a lot of advantages. But I suppose I can put it this way. It's a fascinating subject. There are many people who can't think. Seriously. That woman, and I mean no disrespect, but she says she envisions nothing. She thinks nothing. She just comprehends what is being said. But the reality is, I don't think she does. I think the information is processed to a degree that it is stored as memory and can be recited to a certain degree. But the inability to question yourself in your own mind and challenge these thoughts would result in you saying the wrong thing. There's no logical path happening. The other thing I can add too is there's like a math track, essentially. Here's what I think. I think that your brain has all of these different areas that are good at these different things. I think IQ is like 16 different areas of intelligence. I could be wrong. So in your mind, you have these capabilities, but how connected are they? I remember reading about people who there's this thing that connects your brain. I don't know what it's called. Let me look it up. Connects hemispheres of brain. It is the corpus callosum. 2 hemispheres are connected by a thick band of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. The brain halves are able to communicate with each other via this bridge. Fascinating. So are there 2 different conscious entities within you? That makes sense. I read stories about people who had the corpus callosum severed, where one side of the brain controls, it's like the left side controls the right and the right side controls the left or something like this. And so if the corpus callosum is severed, you now have no communication between your left and right hand. And so the dominant hemisphere of your brain may get you to engage, will control your waking conscious movements, and the other side is shut out. I think House, MD, did an episode about this, where one hemisphere of the brain was angry that the other hemisphere was doing things that it thought was wrong, and so the hand would grab the other hand and stop it, and they couldn't control it, and they didn't know why it was happening. The reality is part of their brain didn't know why it was happening, but it couldn't communicate. And so I think the end result was Dr. House saying, verbally, because the brain has been severed, and because the hemispheres can't communicate, there's one hemisphere of your brain, half of yourself has been locked away. So you need to verbally say what you're doing and why you're doing it and explain it and hope that's enough for the other half of you that's screaming, trapped inside. How terrifying. Half of your conscious self. So anyway, I don't know. I thought it was an interesting to rant on, and I thought it was an interesting to bring up because I'm curious for all of you to comment. How many tracks are your mind? Let me pull something else up too. I think it's called anaphasia. Was that what it's called? The loss of ability to understand or express speech caused by brain damage. No, that's aphasia. So what am I thinking of? Okay, no, that's something else. Anaphasic? What is that? Oh, that has to do with then I don't know what I'm thinking of. Let me see. Let's do this. Visualize an apple. I'm getting the word wrong. Think of an apple in your head meme. Here we go. Someone tweeted, This is still blowing my mind. Close your eyes and imagine an apple. What do you see? She says, I'm a 5. There's a ranking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in 5, it's nothing. It's just empty. There are people who are like, close your eyes and imagine an apple. I don't see anything. There are people who see 4, which is the white outline, 3, which is like black and white, 2, which is very cartoonish, and 1, which is a visual picture of an apple. If that's 1, I'm well beyond that. Not only can I imagine an apple, I can see a guy. I'll top of my head. Okay, RoboCop is juggling a bunch of apples while Oliver Anthony is singing Rich Men North of Richmond. I can hear him singing it. And then he grabs an apple. He's grabbing an apple from RoboCop and he takes a big old bite. And now there's a big truck bringing apples. Not only do I see the apple, I can see the world around the apple. The apple is spinning. I can see every detail. I can see inside, outside. I'm not trying to brag about this. I know it sounds silly. I think it's just fascinating. And it's important to break this down. As people argue that some people are NPCs, and it's worrying, I do think it's worrying that there could be someone with zero logical capability. That's terrifying. But I also think it's important to expand beyond the concept of internal monologue. It goes well beyond internal monologue. There are a bunch of different ways your brain can process information, and not everybody has access or the capability to do all of them. In fact, I think it's extremely likely substantially more people on this planet are way beyond the capabilities I have and are going to be shocked to find. They're going to be like, wait, you only can think in 4 tracks? You can't do this? You can't? I guess not. I can't do what I can't do. Some people who were born could never see. They don't know what colors are. How do you even describe what a color is? That's fascinating, right? How do you define color? There's a definition. The quality of light based on the reflective, elements of a substance or something like this. And it's like, yeah, I guess. But that really doesn't describe the essence of what color is. And do we have words to describe it? It's fascinating, isn't it? I'll end with this. Why I believe in God. In some form or another, seeing that some people can't process information and knowing that I can. I'm not saying all people. I'm saying there exist some people who can't comprehend in their minds vision, sounds, or words. It becomes very obvious. You and I are not the end-all be-all of conscious power in this world. There certainly will exist beings well beyond our capabilities. There may be a being, and I'm not even talking godly. There could be life or the possibility of life that would look at us and go, how strange these creatures are that they can't actually calculate the atomic structure of objects simply by observing them. And it's like, well, we kind of can. That's within our capabilities, but it's really hard. We had to build instruments to do it. And they're going to be like, no, I can pick something up and instantly just know all of its atoms. How many atoms are there? How many electrons? How many quarks? And for you, it's a struggle. You can barely do it. Took a long time to build machines to get there. We can intrinsically just do. And then they go, can you Flurbolgon the Gabo state? And you'll go, huh? And they'll be like, you can't Flurbogon? And you'll be like, I don't even know what that means. And they'll be like, wow, it is beyond your comprehension to even understand this concept. And we'd say yes. The likelihood that there exists another being with more capabilities than you is 1. The likelihood that we exist as the epitome of conscious thought is an absurdity. Anyway, long philosophical scientific rant on inner monologues and NPCs. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope it allowed you to self-reflect upon yourselves. And I don't know. Interesting. I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up at 4 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.